Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning everyone. My name is Nastiti Ika Farestri. I am a student of English Literature program at Yogyakarta State University, and I am a moderator as well as a welcome speaker, and thanks to all of you who are willing to attend this event. And this event is analyzing George Orwell's Allegory of the Russian Revolution through Animal Farm. This book was written in 1945 with a total 112 pages. And on this occasion, I was also accompanied by several speakers from another students of English Literature program, Yogyakarta State University, Taufiq Azhfar Frakadayat, Raden Muhammad Rayhan Kori, and Aprilia Eka. I begin by presenting a summary of this book that can be read carefully first. As Orwell spent more and more time with the dawn out of England, he became convinced that the only remedy for the insidious problem of poverty lay in socialism, a political and economic philosophy arguing that only when the state controls the means of production and distribution will all members of a nation share its profits and rewards. Unlike capitalism, the philosophy holding that a nation's means of production and distribution should be privately owned and controlled. Socialism argues that only government regulation of a nation's economy can close the gap between the rich and the poor. Although he was not a virulent anti-capitalist, Orwell did think that only with the gradual introduction of socialized ideas and practice into British life would the poor eventually come to share in the fruits of their nation's prosperity. As he explained in his preface to the Ukrainian edition of Animal Farm, I become pro-socialist more out of disgust with the way the poorer section of the industrial workers were oppressed and neglected than out of any theoretical admiration for a planned society. After fighting against fascism, an oppressive system of government in which the ruling party has complete economic control, in the Spanish Civil War, Orwell dedicated himself to exploring political question in his writing, as he explains in the essay Why I Write. Every line of serious work I have written since 1936 has been written directly or indirectly against totalitarianism and for democratic socialism. His detestation and fear of totalitarianism, and even more extreme form of fascism in which the ruling party has complete control over all aspects of people's lives, this informed much of his literary output. Orwell examined socialism in a number of his non-fiction works, but was prompted to write Animal Farm by what he saw as a prevalent and false belief that the Russian Revolution of 1917 was a step towards socialism for millions of poor and oppressed Russians. Orwell felt that Stalin's brutal rise to power was not only barbaric but a betrayal of the socialist principle for which Lenin, Trotsky, and he had personally revolted. In hindsight, this seems obvious, but in the world of World War II Europe, such an attack on Russia was willingly stifled by many British leftists who want to believe that Russia was indeed moving toward a true union of socialized republics. The fact that Russia was like England fighting Hitler also made Orwell's position more unpalatable to leftist thinkers. Still, he felt that the USSR was not progressing toward socialism but totalitarianism, I was struck by clear signs of its transformation into a hierarchical society in which the rulers have no more reason to give up their power than any ruling class, convinced that a destruction of the Soviet myth was essential if we want a revival of the socialist movement. Orwell began thinking about how he could best communicate his opinions on socialism and Stalin. His thoughts were ignited when he happened to see a village boy whipping a cart horse. At the moment, Orwell received the inspiration he needed to formulate his ideas into animal forms. It struck me that if only such animals become aware of their strength, we would have no power over them, and that men exploit animals. As the government in a totalitarian state exploited the common people, now Orwell had a plan for his novel which would both argue the need for a true socialist government and warn the world of the ways in which socialized idea threatened the will of this empower who wish to control other people. His book would demonstrate the ways in which, despite all of their socialist propaganda, the leaders of the Russian Revolution, especially Stalin, had created in a system even worse than its previous and its previous one, and sound an alarm to all English readers about the dangers of believing in the Soviet myth. For a more detailed examination of how the events of the novel parallel those of the Russian Revolution, see the critical essays. After a number of rejections from publishers, the novel was finally accepted by the small publishing firm of Secker and Warburg and proved to be a tremendous success. But in England and the United States, after 1984, another novel that portrays life under an oppressive government, Animal Farm, is Orwell's most renowned work. Of course, the novel's meaning is not rooted solely in its portrayal of the Russian Revolution. The novel asks its readers to examine the ways in which political leaders with seemingly noble and altruistic motives can betray the very ideals in which they ostensibly believe, as well as the ways in which certain members of a nation can elect themselves to positions of great power and abuse their fellow citizens, all under the guise of assisting them. The novel also presents the subtle ways in which a group of citizens of a farm or a nation can be eventually led by the nose into a terrible life ruled by a totalitarian regime. In Why I Write, Orwell describes Animal Farm as the first book in which I tried with full consequences of what I was doing to fuse political purpose and artistic purpose into one whole. His political purpose, presenting a model of socialism gone wrong, is found in the way that the novel's animals reflect different kinds of humans and their struggles for freedom and power. Orwell felt that a farm where all animals are equal would solve many social and economic problems, but he also knew that such a system would be difficult to maintain, since some animals would act on the principle that some are more equal than others. And that was our first session, then continued with the next session, the historical aspect, Taufiq Azhfar Frakadayat.
Okay, thank you, Atin, for giving me the time to talk about the historical context or references that the book was based on. So the book itself is an allegory of the Russian Revolution, which occurred in the year 1917. And the timeline of the book itself actually covers the preceding events of the revolution until the Second World War. Now, let's begin by discussing with each chapter. I will be showing you a PowerPoint slideshow on the screen here, and we'll be starting from the first chapter. Now, in the first chapter, the writer introduces us to Manor Farm and the owner, Mr. Jones, and all of the animals living and working in it. Now, this is actually a reference to the Russian Empire, whereas Mr. Jones, or the owner, is Tsar Nicholas II, which was the emperor of Russia at the time, and the animals are the citizens. Now, the way the writer explains the lives of the animals, which are living in a hard life and they are sometimes abandoned, is actually referring to Tsar Nicholas II's rule at the time. He was actually quite competent as a leader, but he often made mistakes, especially regarding the common people of the Russian Empire at the time. So the animals are suffering, so it means that those are the flaws of his rule. And one of the characters that appears at the start is Old Major. Now, Old Major is actually a reference to Karl Marx because he stood up and made a speech. Now, his speech is related to the unfairness of the animals being treated in the farm itself. And this is actually a direct reference to his Communist Manifesto because the key points of the speech itself contains about the dreams of having an equal state and also the removal of capitalism. And this actually took place in the 19th century, which is in the late 1800s. Now, moving on to the second chapter. The second chapter is where the Russian Revolution is about to start. So it shows that the animals are starting to get more and more unpleased with Mr. Jones in the farm itself. So it's actually a reference to the citizens of Russia starting to dislike the Tsar's reign. And in the story, Moses the Raven starts to talk about religious things. Now, this is actually a direct reference to how the Russian Empire at the time used religious clergies to prevent things from going out of hand, because the Russian people at the time were religious, and religion was used as means of preventing bad things from occurring. And even though that was applied, it did not work for a long time. The animals are becoming more and more disappointed, and the four pigs and the pigs that are mentioned in the story actually refers to Bolsheviks. Now, Bolsheviks are the people who believe in communism in Russia at the time, and it was led by three key figures. The first is being Vladimir Lenin, the second is Joseph Stalin, and the third one is Leon Trotsky. Now, in this book, only two of them are mentioned or referenced, which is Napoleon, which is Joseph Stalin, and Snowball, which is Leon Trotsky. As the animal starts to think about the ideology, especially the pigs started to invite the animals and think about a plan. The plan is to revolt against Mr. Jones. And because they couldn't stand any longer being under Mr. Jones, they actually started the revolt. And this is actually a reference to the Russian Revolution. The animals revolted and it ended up with Mr. Jones leaving the farm. This is a reference to the Tsar abdicating from his rule. And also in this part of the chapter, it is mentioned that the pigs went inside the farmhouse where Mr. Jones lived. It is actually referring to the real life event where the Bolsheviks took over the Winter Palace. Now, the Winter Palace is the place where the Tsar and his family resided. And also, after they controlled the farm, they established their own government. And in this book, it occurred in a way where they renamed the farm into Animal Farm. The establishment of the Animal Farm is actually a reference to where the Bolshevik took control of Russia. And the pigs started educating other animals and indoctrinating them. It's a reference to the propaganda and the doctrine used by the Bolsheviks. And when the animals are starting to work under the animal farm rule, the pigs took over the milk. The milk was usually used by the farmer to be blended with the animals' feed. But in this case, the pigs gave a reason to the animals that it will be controlled by them in order to achieve the farm's goal. And this is actually a reference to state-controlled economy. Now let's go to the third chapter. It shows that the animals are working hard and successfully while the pigs are in control, and a reference to the Soviet collective agriculture. And also, the pigs, especially Napoleon, started to train dogs taken away when they were puppies. This is actually referring to the real life event where the secret police and the Red Army is established. Snowball decided to use the hoof and horn as the symbol of the farm. This is a reference to the hammer and sickle, which was used by the Soviet Union or other communist countries. And the green flag is actually the sign where the animal farm is legitimized, or in real life, it's when the Soviet Union is fully established. Now, moving on to the fourth part. This is the part where the Russian Civil War was actually being explained. Now, Mr. Jones went away from the farm, but he did not die. Now, because he is a human, he went to other farms. And the other farm reacted to what occurred in the manor farm, which is now the animal farm. And these reactions are actually a reference to how Great Britain and Germany reacted. So Foxwood is Great Britain and Pinchfield is Germany. And also there's a lot of rumors about the animal farms, which are not good rumors. And people started to hate the farm or maybe grow suspicious about the farm. Now, climax. Now, in the next part of the chapter, the humans from the farms attack the animal farm. Now, in the Russian Civil War, it's not Great Britain or Germany attacking the Soviet Union, but rather rebels and also sides that were against the Soviet. And in the story, the humans got defeated and the animal farm is still under the control of the animals. And this is what actually occurred in the Russian Civil War. The Soviets managed to survive and the Russian Empire and the other rebels were fully abolished. Now in the fifth chapter, this is where things are starting to get more and more intense. Now in the story, it is often mentioned that Napoleon and also Snowball often had disagreements and also debates. Now in this part of the chapter, they are debating about a windmill plan. And in the story, after the debate was done, Napoleon summoned dogs to chase Snowball away from the farm. This is a reference to how Leon Trotsky was put into exile from the Soviet Union. So he was being kicked out from the nation. And this occurred in 1927. Now, the way Napoleon used dogs to suppress and scare other animals that were against him is actually a reference to the birth of Stalinism. Now, Stalinism is simply referred as Stalin's influence in the Soviet Union, which was at the time really, really fundamental, and it was really planted deep into the Soviet state. Now, Napoleon started to set up more plans and created more work for the animals, and he eventually used the windmill. And this is a reference to the Soviet industrialization on 1929, and Napoleon's plans is actually a reference to Stalin's 5-year plans, which have been conducted many times of the years. Now, the Soviet Union was anti-capitalist and anti-West. So was the animal farm. They are anti-human from the 7 commandments that they started. In the story, Napoleon started trade through a human in order to reach the market. Now, this is a reference to how the Soviets started to open up their market a little bit. And after working hard, the animals have less or little food. And this is a reference to the famine that actually occurred during Stalin's industrialization and 5-year plans. And because he was trading with the humans, I mean, Napoleon trading with the humans demanded eggs. And at the moment, at the farm, it was really something that was quite impossible. And the hens protested. And in reference to the real events that happened at the time, those who were against or protested are suppressed, or even sometimes being executed. And that was shown in the book where some of the chickens who refused were starved to death or maybe led to die. And these are actually being done by Napoleon himself and the dogs, and this is a reference to Stalin's secret police or the NKVD. Now, the NKVD is Stalin's own secret police. And not only that it is occurring to the normal citizens, it's actually occurring in the government as well. In the story, the four pigs and other animals that are against him or maybe like considered as traitors are executed. And in the book, it's actually explicitly described how they were executed. And in the real life, this actually happened, and lots of people, even close to Stalin, were executed just because they think that they are against him or a threat to his rule. And this was a reference to the Great Purge of 1936 until 1938. Now, this is where things are starting to get more and more interesting. In the 8th chapter, Napoleon is starting to get more and more self-secluded. So he rarely appears and he always has guards or dogs around him. And this is actually an actual reference to Stalin's paranoia. His mental health was deteriorating because of his fear and also what he did. But this also led to some decisions that were against a lot of people in the Soviet Union or in the animal farm itself. At the time, Pinchfield Farm, which was one of the farm where Mr. Jones went to, or the neighboring farm, was controlled by Frederick, a human. Now there are rumors within the animals about the cruelty in the farm of Frederick, which the animals are being mistreated or even tortured and anything like that. And it's actually a reference to Adolf Hitler. So Frederick is Adolf Hitler and Pinchfield is Germany under Nazi and Hitler's rule. Napoleon actually started to sell some timber to Frederick. So he's basically creating diplomacy with the Germans in real life. And this was actually real. And this is a reference to the Molotov and Ribbentrop Pact, where they are trying to make agreement about Poland and they will not be attacking one another. And in this case, in the animal farm, they agree that the Frederick's farm will get timber and the animal farm will get money. But in the end, they are being tricked by the humans, and the money that was given was actually not real. And the form of betrayal in real life is the invasion of Germany, which is explained in a book where Frederick's men attacked the animal farm. This is actually a reference to Operation Barbarossa, or the German invasion of Russia, which occurred in 1941. Now, the windmill that was in the farm got destroyed. The animals at first could not handle the humans' attack at the farm because the humans were so powerful and more superior than them. And in real life, the Soviet Union actually got steamrolled in their own lands by the Germans. But then after the windmill was destroyed, the animals were enraged. And they fought back and drove away the humans. And in real life, the windmill might be a symbol of Stalingrad, one of the important city in Soviet Russia, where they fought hard, and one of the character, which is Boxer, and other animals are dying, and some of the buildings in the farm are destroyed. Now, this is a depiction of how the Soviet Union was attacked by Germany. A lot of people died, and many infrastructures were destroyed. Now, at the end of the story, after the battle against the humans was done, the animal farm became more modern and larger with the help of Mr. Pilkington. So Pilkington is actually the depiction of Winston Churchill from Britain. So the way he helped the farm by giving like tools and equipment is actually a reference to the land lease and support program by the Western countries, in which they send weapons, supplies, and other things that are required in order to fight a war. And this actually occurred during the Second World War. And at the final part of the story, the pigs having dinner with the humans, and they are starting to act more like humans. and they actually had dinner with them is actually a symbolic about how the anti-Western state is becoming closer and closer to Western states. In this case, with the British and the Americans, because the dinner party or the gathering at the farmhouse is actually a symbolism of the Yalta Conference, in which the leader of the Soviet Union, the Great Britain, and also the USA came into a conference called the Yalta Conference of 1943. So the way George Orwell describe history to us is actually quite interesting, because the book itself it actually uses direct and I will say explicit references, and some of the details are quite explicit as well. So that was the historical references or the historical context of the book that I have read. So that is all that I can say in my session. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yes, thank you, Taufiq, for our explanation of historical aspect. And let's go straight to the characterization described by Raden Muhammad Rayhan Kori.
Okay, all right. Thank you for the opportunity that has been given to me. I am now going to present my findings and the result of our group's discussion. And so I am going to present about their characters. So the first character is Mr. Jones. After reading, it can be implied or it can be known that he is quite irresponsible to his animal and his farm, because he let the buildings not taken care of and the animals starve, right? But then he is kind but also cruel. This is can be said to be quite the same as Tsar Nicholas II, because Tsar Nicholas is also a little bit incompetent, maybe a poor leader, maybe compared to other leaders of the other nations, and he is also kind and cruel. How what in what kind he is in what way he is kind. He is hiring young generations like students to be spies to spy in other countries, and he is cruel, I think, only to his opponent. For the next character is Old Mayer and Karl Marx. They are both an inventor, or the person behind the ideology of their own, namely the animalism and communism, respectively. And they also have both what a way of thinking, maybe, where everybody must be equal. In Old Major's case, the animals work and the humans take all the effort, the result of the effort, and the animals gain nothing. Well, only gain a tiny little bit of their own work. While in Karl Marx's case, uh, it's the same. The worker class gains only a portion, where the other portion is given to the upper class, the purchase class. And another similarity between these two characters is that they both died before the revolution or the rebellion started in each of their own place. For the next character, we have Snowball and Leon Trotsky. So, in my findings, they are both good speaker. You can say that they are a spokesperson to a higher person, right? The point is, Snowball takes the teaching of Old Major, while Trotsky follows the idea of Marx. So it's quite the same, I think. And they are both trying to improve the situation in their own place, in their animal farm and the Soviet Union. They want to improve it to be better, because after the previous leader, the Tsar and Mr. Jones, has driven out from the place, from the throne, things are bad for life. So this super character, is trying to change it for the better. But then these two characters also driven out by the rival. In Snowball's case, it's Napoleon, and in Trotsky's case, it's Stalin, by the means of the secret police. For the next character, we have Napoleon and Joseph Stalin. Now, these two characters, they are not that fluent in speech, in convincing other people, so they use the help, they use other persons, they use Snowball and Trotsky, respectively. But they both had ideas, they both had their own ideas, their motto, their ethics. And Napoleon and Stalin is also both cruel, and they desire power. And to gain the power, they remove the other opposition, the rivals, their opposition, especially the characters Snowball and Trotsky. They remove both of them from their scene. The next character is Squealer. Now, Squealer is like a propaganda department of Napoleon. Same as with Molotov, he is the head editor of Pravda, right? One of the most influential newspaper agency in Soviet Union. They are both very convincing in their talking. In the novel, early in the chapter, we can read that Squealer can make white become black, right? It is that convincing, his power of persuasion. And so it is true for the newspaper editor Molotov. He can write everything that is said by Stalin to gain favor. That is the comparison between these two characters. And the next is the dogs, the litter of dogs that Napoleon kept in the attic, I think, if I remember correctly, which is compared to the KGB, the secret police of the Soviet Union. So they are used by their respective leader, this case Napoleon and Stalin, to force people and animals to work, right? But then they are not in the sense of a police. They seems like a private army under the commands of Napoleon and Stalin. And this aspect or character, I may say, is using force and other means to remove Stalin's and Napoleon's rival or opposition or opponent, whatever you may call it. And these two characters are both a piece of pawn for Stalin and Napoleon to do their strategy, to control the mass, to control the people, the animal and the people, respectively. The next character and aspect is Moses the Raven. initially Moses is rejected both by Snowball and Napoleon, right? Because he makes the animals work where they should be resting. But then, after Snowball left, after Trotsky left, Moses the Raven, or in the real life case, it is religion, the what Russian Orthodox, I think, Orthodoxy, yes. The new leader, the current leader, Napoleon and Stalin, used this aspect, used Raven, used Moses and the religion to be a force to drive the the mass, the animal, and the people to work, because the religion, or in this case the character Moses, it presents a lie, which is the heavens, or in the Animal Farm's case, it's the sugar candy mountain, right? Where people and animals can rest after their hard labors. So eventually Stalin used this to convince, to use the people, the mass, the animal to work, because they are given the promise of heavens, right? Like that. The next character is Molly the mayor. After the revolution, we can see that Molly is what? Taken gifts, ribbons, sugar, something like that from other humans, right? Other farmers. It means that she, or in the real life case, the vain and selfish people who left Russia after the revolution, they only care for themselves. They didn't or only care a little bit about the revolution, and they went to other side, to other party, to other country, to who offers something that is better than what they have had before. For the next character, we have Boxer and the communist supporter, I think. No, they are both strong. They are both you can say they are both the backbone, the labor, the one who builds the working class of the Animal Farm and the Soviet Union. So they still believe Napoleon, their current leader, their current bad leader, even after they know that they both believed without checking. They blindly believe the current leader. In this case, they think that they have to work harder, and if it cannot be solved by hard working, it means that they have to work even harder. And they both are betrayed by their leaders. In Boxer's case, he is betrayed by Napoleon, by him selling Boxers to the Neckers field to be turned and boiled into glue, while in the real life case, Stalin betrayed the working class. For the next character, we have Benjamin, a donkey, and the skeptical, or the older generations in Soviet Union. They are both suspicious towards the state of their society, right? But they are they actually have the power to change it, but they couldn't or wouldn't do anything about it, because their fear for their security, their safety, their current situation. They think that if right if the situation now is it did nothing to me, to myself, then I shouldn't do anything because they think that the idleness is somewhat acceptable. But then I think uh, that is it from my part. Thank you for your attention, and the I will return it to the MC. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rayhan, for making us know more about the characters in this farm book. And then we are in the last session, George Orwell's writing style from Aprilia Eka.
Hello everyone, thank you Nastiti Ika for giving me this opportunity. Now, I would like to talk about George Orwell writing style. Let's get started. Each writers have their own writing style that makes them different from other writers. Their style in writing portrayed as their signature. In George Orwell's case, he has his style when he makes his story. There are 3 points that make him different from any other writers. The first one is short. He tends to make his sentence shorter than any other writers. The second is to the point. He avoids using figure of speech like metaphor and similar when writing his works. Because using figure of speech or figurative language can easily make his reader, like misunderstand with his intention, his original intention. So he will avoid using figurative language to make his sentence or his works more to the point. The last or the third is his works hides political message. What I mean by he hides political message, like what we discussed today in Animal Farm, there are hidden message about politics. It tells us about Russian Revolution and what happened in Russia in 1917. It also tells us about Russia under the rule of communists. Like what I have mentioned before, in Animal Farm, he avoids using figurative language, unnecessary words, and intricate language because it can easily make the readers misunderstand his intention or his original idea about the story. In Animal Farm, the language is used to manipulate and maintain control to others. For example, the pigs as a government use language as propaganda, songs, and other that can easily make the animal in the farm trick into believe them. I think this is the dangerous of the language when used to manipulate people. There are 2 kind of people that I think when he or she trying to voices his argument or his idea, he use explicit way or implicit way. What I mean by explicit is they can easily voices their struggle or their ideas into the world, and the other is implicit. What I mean by implicit is that people cannot openly talk about what is in their mind, then they use another medium to deliver their voices. And George Orwell can be an example of people that express their voice implicitly. He used his ability to write a story and then he critiqued the Russia regime about what they're doing with his work. George Orwell have 6 writing rules that can improve writing skills and avoid corruption of modern English writing. The first rule is never use figurative language like metaphor or simile. The second is always use shorter sentence instead of longer sentence. The third is, if possible, we should cut out the unnecessary words in the longer words. The fourth, never use passive sentence if we can use the active one. The fifth, never use foreign phrases or a scientific word or any jargon if we can use everyday language. And the last is break any of these rules sooner than say anything outright barbarous. Last but not least, I would like to tell you why we should read this kind of books. The first one is it can sharpen our critical mind. For example, in story that we discussed today, in Animal Farm, actually tell us about what happened in Russia in 1917 when Russia ruled under Communist Party. In the story, not explicitly mentioned what the relationship between what happened in real life and what mentioned in the story. So the readers will keep thinking, keep questioning what is actually the relationship between the real life event and what in the story. The second reason is that we can learn about history but with different point of view. What I mean by different point of view is that when we learn history in school, like, you know how boring is that language in the historical books? So people don't really like history because the history book is quite boring for them. So by reading this kind of novel, we can learn history but in a more fun way, I think, because a novel is different from historical book. The language is more beautiful, I think, and not boring if compared with the historical book. The third is that this kind of book, it can be used to reference for further study about history and literature. And lastly, it can deepen your knowledge. By reading this kind of novel, we can enrich our knowledge about history and literature that we couldn't get from any other books. So like reading this kind of novel will surely enrich your knowledge. Thank you. That's all for me. See you next time.
Thank you so much, Aprilia, for explaining how great George Orwell wrote a book. And finally, we have reached the end of this event. I will explain a little summary of the speakers. George Orwell wrote this story because he wanted to express his hatred, but poured it into a book. Most of the events in the book contain direct references to the real historical events, aside from the portrayal of the real-life figures. And reasons why we would read this kind of book like Animal Farm are to sharpen our critical mind, further study about history and literature, to know history with different perspectives and deepen our knowledge. And then the interaction of Snowball and Napoleon is quite the same as the interaction of Leon Trotsky and Joseph Stalin. Snowball as Trotsky and Napoleon is Stalin is both following the animalism or communism ideology, but then Napoleon desires for more power and control of the animals or people. So he then exiled Snowball to remove a possible rival and turned him into a scapegoat and everything that is wrong with the farm or Soviet Union. Many thanks to all speakers who took the time to share their knowledge, and I hope this event will provide many benefits for all. Thank you very much to all of you who took time to join this event. See you!